The Senate chamber erupted into chaos yesterday during what was supposed to be a routine debate on climate change legislation. In a fiery exchange that shocked onlookers, Senator Bernie Sanders and Senator Ted Cruz nearly came to blows, with both men yelling at the top of their lungs and pointing fingers as their colleagues scrambled to de-escalate the situation. The drama began as Sanders passionately advocated for urgent action to address climate change, unveiling a sweeping proposal aimed at cutting carbon emissions by 50% within the next decade. "The science is clear," Sanders declared, his voice booming across the chamber. "If we do not act now, we are condemning future generations to an uninhabitable planet. This is not about politics. It's about survival." Cruz, seated across the room, shook his head and muttered audibly, "Here we go again with the socialist fear-mongering." Sanders paused mid-sentence, his eyes narrowing as he turned to face Cruz. "Excuse me, Senator Cruz," he said sharply. "Do you have something you'd like to add to this discussion?" Cruz wasted no time. Rising to his feet, he launched into a scathing critique of Sanders' proposal. "What you're suggesting, Senator Sanders, is nothing short of economic suicide," Cruz said. "Your so-called Green New Deal would destroy jobs, bankrupt families, and leave America dependent on foreign energy. It's a pipe dream for people who don't understand how the real world works." Sanders fired back immediately. "The real world, Senator Cruz? The real world is watching wildfires, hurricanes, and droughts devastate communities while you sit here and defend the fossil fuel industry. This is about saving lives, not protecting corporate profits." The tension in the room was palpable as the two men stepped closer, each raising their voices with every word. Cruz jabbed a finger in Sanders' direction. "Your radical agenda is un-American, Bernie," he shouted. "You want to tear down everything this country stands for just to satisfy your environmentalist cronies." Sanders, not backing down, took a step forward. "Un-American," he bellowed. "What's un-American is refusing to protect the planet for your own political gain. You're standing in the way of progress, and history will not be kind to people like you." By this point, other senators began intervening, attempting to calm the escalating confrontation. "Gentlemen, this is not the place for personal attacks," one senator pleaded. But neither Sanders nor Cruz appeared willing to back down. Cruz leaned in, his face red with anger. "You think you're some kind of moral authority," he snapped. "You're a hypocrite, Bernie. You fly around in private jets while lecturing the rest of us about carbon emissions." The room erupted in gasps as Sanders fired back. "How dare you? I don't need lectures on hypocrisy from someone who's taken millions from oil and gas companies. At least I'm fighting for the people, not lining my pockets." The two men were now inches apart, both shouting over each other as the chamber descended into chaos. Reporters in the gallery frantically took notes, capturing every heated word as the confrontation reached a boiling point. "I've had enough of your lies," Sanders yelled, slamming his hand on a nearby desk. Cruz retaliated by pointing aggressively at Sanders, his voice rising even higher. "And I've had enough of your socialist nonsense." Security personnel entered the room, positioning themselves between the two senators as their colleagues urged them to step back. "This is not how we conduct ourselves in the Senate," the majority leader shouted, his gavel pounding furiously. The incident quickly became the talk of the nation, with video clips of the altercation spreading like wildfire on social media. Hashtags like #Sanders vs. Cruz and #Senate Showdown began trending within minutes, sparking intense debates about climate policy and political decorum. Late-night comedians couldn't resist turning the incident into fodder for their monologues. One joked, "When Bernie Sanders and Ted Cruz go at it, it's not just politics, it's pay-per-view entertainment." Another quipped, "Who knew the Senate was the new UFC?" Cable news networks dedicated entire segments to analyzing the exchange, with commentators on both sides weighing in. Progressives praised Sanders for standing up to what they called Cruz's climate denial, while conservatives hailed Cruz as a defender of American energy independence. Amid the backlash, both senators issued statements defending their actions. Sanders, speaking at a press conference, said, "I will not apologize for fighting for the future of this planet. The stakes are too high, and the time for polite discussions is over." Cruz, in an interview with a conservative outlet, called Sanders' behavior unhinged, and doubled down on his opposition to the climate proposal. "I won't let radical socialists dictate America's energy policy," he declared. "The people deserve better." The confrontation also reignited debates about the effectiveness of Congress in addressing pressing issues. This spectacle highlights the dysfunction in Washington, one political analyst said. We need serious solutions, not shouting matches. As the controversy continued, both Sanders and Cruz used the moment to galvanize their respective bases. Sanders launched a fundraising campaign, emphasizing his commitment to climate action, while Cruz rallied supporters with promises to fight against radical environmentalism. For many Americans, the incident symbolized the deep divisions in the country, with climate change serving as a flashpoint for broader ideological battles. Whether viewed as a necessary clash of ideas or a troubling display of partisanship, one thing was clear. This was a moment no one would soon forget. As the video of Bernie Sanders and Ted Cruz's near-physical altercation continued to circulate online, it became clear that this was no ordinary political spat. It was an unprecedented political earthquake. Every major news outlet interrupted their regular programming to dissect the exchange, airing split-screen analyses of Sanders slamming his hand on the desk and Cruz pointing furiously in rebuttal. Commentators on progressive networks lauded Sanders for his passionate defense of climate action, framing him as a fearless warrior in the fight against corporate greed. Bernie Sanders is the voice of reason in an era of climate denial, one anchor said. He called out Ted Cruz for what he truly is, a stooge for the fossil fuel industry. Meanwhile, conservative pundits rallied behind Cruz, portraying him as a champion of free markets and a defender against what they described as Sanders' socialist climate hysteria. Ted Cruz stood firm against the radical left's agenda to destroy American jobs, a Fox News host proclaimed. This is what leadership looks like. The fallout wasn't confined to the media. Outside the Capitol, protests erupted on both sides of the climate debate. Environmental activists carried signs reading "Climate Action Now" and "Bernie's right, the planet can't wait." Meanwhile, Cruz supporters gathered nearby, waving banners that said "Energy Independence First" and "Stop the Socialist Takeover." Inside Congress, the Senate was abuzz with tension as lawmakers struggled to navigate the aftermath of the clash. Moderates from both parties expressed dismay at the spectacle, calling it a disgraceful display of partisanship. One senator, speaking anonymously, said, "This isn't how we solve problems. This is how we make headlines." But for Sanders and Cruz, the confrontation became a rallying cry. At a packed town hall in Vermont, Sanders addressed the incident directly. "I will not apologize for fighting for the future of this planet," he told the cheering crowd. "Ted Cruz and his allies may call it socialism, but I call it survival. And I won't back down." In Texas, Cruz struck a similar tone during a campaign stop. Bernie Sanders wants to destroy American energy and impose his radical agenda on hardworking families, Cruz declared to a supportive audience. "I stood up to him because someone has to fight for the people who keep this country running." The clash sparked renewed debates on climate policy across the nation. Universities hosted forums on the ethics of climate action, and podcasts devoted entire episodes to analyzing the Sanders-Cruz showdown. One popular podcast titled Burning Point, "The Climate Debate Explodes," quickly became the top download on streaming platforms. Social media remained a battleground, with hashtags like #ClimateClash and #Bernie vs. Cruz trending for days. Memes flooded Twitter, ranging from humorous depictions of Sanders and Cruz as boxing opponents to serious infographics breaking down the stakes of the climate debate. Late-night comedians continued to mine the incident for comedic gold. One viral skit featured an exaggerated reenactment of the confrontation, with an actor playing Sanders wielding a solar panel like a sword while Cruz defended himself with an oil barrel. The skit ended with both characters being dragged off the stage by security. Despite the humor, the stakes were no laughing matter. Polling conducted in the days after the incident revealed deep divisions among voters. While Sanders saw a surge in support from younger, progressive voters, Cruz's approval among conservatives and rural voters also climbed. Political analysts noted that the clash had further polarized the electorate. Amid the ongoing controversy, both senators doubled down on their positions. Sanders introduced an updated version of his climate proposal, calling it the Green Future Act. The legislation included even stricter emissions targets and provisions for transitioning workers in the fossil fuel industry to green energy jobs. Cruz, in response, unveiled his own energy policy platform, which he dubbed the American Energy Independence Plan. The proposal focused on expanding domestic oil and gas production while investing in nuclear and clean coal technologies. "We can protect the environment without destroying the economy," Cruz said during a press conference. The competing proposals ignited fierce debates on Capitol Hill, with lawmakers struggling to find common ground. Senate hearings on the policies became contentious, with both sides accusing each other of bad faith. One hearing even featured a heated exchange between Sanders and another Republican senator, further underscoring the deep divisions within the chamber. Outside of Washington, the confrontation became a focal point for grassroots activism. Environmental groups launched massive campaigns in support of Sanders' Green Future Act, organizing marches and rallies across the country. Meanwhile, energy industry lobbyists ramped up their efforts to promote Cruz's plan, funding advertisements that framed Sanders' proposal as an economic disaster. The cultural impact of the clash was also undeniable. Artists created murals depicting Sanders and Cruz as symbols of the larger fight between environmentalism and traditional energy. One particularly striking piece featured Sanders holding a globe on fire while Cruz stood in front of an oil rig, both surrounded by protesters. For their part, Sanders and Cruz continued to lean into the narrative, using the incident to energize their respective bases. At a rally in New Hampshire, Sanders addressed his supporters with fiery rhetoric. "The future is not fossil fuels," he declared. "It's renewable energy, clean air, and a livable planet for our children and grandchildren." Cruz, speaking at a fundraiser in Oklahoma, offered a starkly different vision. "We're not going to let Bernie Sanders and the radical left dictate how we live our lives," he said to thunderous applause. "We will protect American energy, American jobs, and American freedom." The ongoing battle spilled into the 24-hour news cycle, with commentators debating the implications for the 2024 presidential race. "This could be a preview of what's to come," one analyst said. "If Sanders and Cruz are this fiery now, imagine what a head-to-head race would look like." As the weeks went on, the Sanders-Cruz showdown became a symbol of the broader ideological divide in America. For some, it was a call to action on climate change. For others, it was a warning against government overreach. Regardless of perspective, one thing was clear. The clash had become a defining moment in modern American politics. As the Sanders-Cruz confrontation continued to dominate headlines, political strategists began to calculate the long-term implications. For Sanders, the moment reinforced his image as a relentless fighter for climate justice. For Cruz, it cemented his role as a defender of traditional energy and free market principles. Both men had managed to galvanize their supporters while drawing sharper battle lines in the political landscape. The debate spilled into late-night television interviews, with Sanders appearing on The Daily Show to discuss his climate plan. "We can't wait any longer," Sanders told the audience. "Ted Cruz can shout all he wants, but the science is clear. This planet is running out of time." The crowd erupted into applause as Sanders reiterated his commitment to combating climate change. Cruz, meanwhile, appeared on Hannity to defend his stance. "This is about more than the environment," Cruz argued. "It's about protecting American workers, families, and our energy independence." Bernie Sanders wants to dismantle the very industries that keep our economy alive. His words resonated with viewers, many of whom praised his defense of traditional energy sectors. Outside Washington, the confrontation became a flashpoint for protests. Environmental activists staged sit-ins at government buildings, demanding immediate action on climate legislation. In response, pro-energy groups organized counter-protests, accusing Sanders and his allies of threatening American jobs. Clashes between the two sides occasionally turned heated, requiring police intervention. The media frenzy surrounding the incident also had unintended consequences. Other senators began voicing their frustrations with the lack of decorum in Congress. One moderate senator commented, "We're supposed to be finding solutions, not turning the Senate into a reality TV show." The remark only added fuel to the fire, with critics accusing both Sanders and Cruz of prioritizing theatrics over progress. Meanwhile, younger voters were increasingly drawn into the debate. College campuses across the country hosted forums and debates about climate policy, with students passionately taking sides. At one university, a mock debate between students playing Sanders and Cruz drew hundreds of attendees and was live-streamed to thousands more. Sanders' campaign seized on the enthusiasm, releasing new ads that highlighted his fiery exchange with Cruz. The tagline read, "Fighting for the planet, fighting for you." The ad featured clips of Sanders' impassioned arguments interspersed with images of climate disasters, ending with a call to action for voters to support his Green Future Act. Not to be outdone, Cruz's team launched a counter-campaign. His ad showed hard-working Americans in factories and oil fields, paired with clips of Cruz standing firm during the Senate clash. The tagline, "Defending America's energy, defending your freedom." The ad targeted key swing states reliant on fossil fuel industries. The cultural ripple effects were impossible to ignore. Musicians released protest songs inspired by the confrontation, with lyrics like "The planet's burning," and "They're still debating," becoming rallying cries at rallies. Filmmakers announced plans for documentaries exploring the divide between environmentalism and energy independence, with the Sanders-Cruz clash as a central theme. Late-night comedians continued to lampoon the confrontation, with one sketch imagining Sanders and Cruz squaring off in a wrestling ring, complete with exaggerated costumes. Sanders as a climate crusader, wielding a wind turbine, and Cruz as a fossil fuel fighter swinging an oil barrel. Amid the chaos, political analysts warned that the confrontation had overshadowed the actual substance of the climate debate. The policies themselves are getting lost in the drama, one analyst noted. People are more focused on the personalities than the solutions. Both Sanders and Cruz remained undeterred. In a joint interview with a national news outlet, Sanders doubled down on his climate rhetoric. "This isn't just a debate, it's a fight for the survival of our planet," he said. Cruz, sitting beside him, smirked and responded, "And it's a fight for the survival of our economy. Let's see who wins." The interview quickly went viral, reigniting the controversy. Supporters on both sides flooded social media with hashtags like #TeamBernie and #TeamCruz, sparking yet another wave of debates, memes, and heated discussions. Even international leaders weighed in on the incident. The French president praised Sanders for his climate advocacy, calling him a beacon of hope for global action. Meanwhile, a Russian energy official sided with Cruz, stating that his defense of fossil fuels was pragmatic and realistic. Back in Congress, tensions remained high. The Senate's next session saw heated discussions on unrelated topics, with senators from both parties trading barbs over the fallout from the Sanders-Cruz confrontation. "This isn't just about climate change anymore," one senator remarked. "It's about how we work, or fail to work, together." Despite the gridlock, Sanders and Cruz both used the moment to amplify their personal brands. Sanders launched a series of town halls focused exclusively on climate action, drawing massive crowds in progressive cities. Cruz, meanwhile, toured energy-producing states, speaking directly to workers about his commitment to their livelihoods. For voters, the incident became a symbol of the growing polarization in American politics. One independent voter summed it up: "They're both passionate, but it feels like no one's listening to each other anymore. How do we solve anything like this?" As Election Day loomed closer, the stakes grew even higher. Both Sanders and Cruz saw their poll numbers rise in their respective strongholds, but national approval ratings revealed a deepening divide. Analysts predicted that the confrontation could shape not just the upcoming elections but the future of climate policy in the United States. Ultimately, the Sanders-Cruz clash became more than a political moment. It became a cultural phenomenon, embodying the fierce debates, ideological divides, and raw emotions that define modern American politics. Whether it led to meaningful change or more partisan gridlock, only time would tell.